There's been a lot of nonsense being spread as the US has pulled out of Afghanistan. I want to do a bit of fact checking about some of this. So the most important one perhaps has to do with a video that's been going around of what appears to be a person being hung from a Black Hawk helicopter in Afghanistan. It's spread everywhere on the right. You can see senators like Ted Cruz retweeting the video saying this horrifying image encapsulates Joe Biden's Afghanistan catastrophe. The Taliban hanging a man from an American Black Hawk helicopter. Tragic, unimaginable. Dan Crenshaw says, in what effing world was it a good idea to just hand over a country to these people? Just bear in mind, he wants us to still be in there. So just bear that in mind. So here's the thing. Ted Cruz says it's unimaginable. And yeah, it kind of is, because that's not what the video actually shows. Bilal Sawari, who's an independent journalist in the region, says an Afghan pilot flying that helicopter is someone who I've known over the years. He was trained in the US and UAE. He confirmed to me that he flew the helicopter. Taliban fighter seen here was trying to install a Taliban flag from the air, but it didn't work in the end. And we're glad that there was that confirmation of it. You could have also watched the other videos that were flowing around, which show the man who's hanging from his waist, waving at some point, but that's not fun. No, this has to encapsulate something. And so it might not encapsulate, as Ted Cruz said, the entire Joe Biden Afghanistan catastrophe. It does encapsulate the right's attachment to fact. It's loose, it's pretty loose.
This is it's a perfect storm for folks like this. Like, it's even better that it's not real, because then they can continue to fool people that it is real, and then we actually have a man hanging from a helicopter that was an interpreter for us, because that'd be a disaster for that man, right? And so we get to have a nice clean BS lie here to tell people, oh yeah, there was a guy hanging from the helicopter. And after we found out that it wasn't the case, let's keep pushing that, because who cares? Nothing we say is real anyway. They've lost the level of consciousness decades ago. There's no way they're coming back from this now. You think they can come back and say, oh, we've updated our information, or we've been updated on our information, our lies, and we've discovered that we were wrong. Yeah. Sorry.
Well, I mean, nobody does that. But we're gonna have, so that what you just laid out, JR, is what a serious person, a mature person would do. So we have less than that. But here is Ted Cruz, who eventually had to respond to the fact that he had spread this video. He tweeted, it turns out the post I shared with a video of Taliban hanging a man from a helicopter may be inaccurate. So I deleted the tweet. No, not may. It's not true. That already sucks. Then he says, what remains accurate is the Taliban are brutal terrorists. We left them millions in US military equipment, including Black Hawk helicopters. So it may be inaccurate, but I was still basically right. And so my follow-up question, Ted Cruz, were you pressuring the administration over the past 6 months to make sure that we get all that equipment out? Was this a thing that you thought about for literally 10 seconds this year? Not just conveniently after the fact you're thinking about it. But JR, that Ted Cruz non-apology is not the worst thing you could do. How about this? You can share that video after all the fact checks, which is what Sean Hannity did on his program, which is watched by hundreds of thousands of people. He just went with it anyway. I guess he woke up yesterday wanting to cover it. Turned out it wasn't true, and he's not gonna let that stop him. By the way, Dan Crenshaw might have taken down the tweet. As of this morning, he had not. Also, Don Jr., his header image is still an image of the helicopter as of right now. Still, it's been fact checked. And the thing is, how many of the elderly people who watch Fox News are ever gonna hear the fact check, JR?
Never.
They're gonna think that was true for the rest of their lives. For the next 6 months, they're gonna think it is true.
Yeah, and then the narrative, at least in their circles, will be, hey, did you hear about how they lied and said that wasn't really an interpreter hanging from the helicopter? Because that's not true. Everyone I've talked to said that it is true. That's why Sean Hannity continued to push it.
Yeah, okay, so that was nonsense, but that was hardly the only Afghanistan-related nonsense that Fox was spreading. Bearing in mind, of course, that Fox technically says they approve of the withdrawal, but they still have to get something out of it. So, for instance, when Biden was meeting with the families of some of the soldiers who died, the service members who died in Afghanistan, it was spread that he looked at his watch. So, within about 15 minutes of the actual ceremony, the host on Newsmax, Benny Johnson, who's total garbage, tweeted the clip out and said it appears that Biden is checking his watch. It instantly spread to the Boston Herald, the Daily Wire, the Daily Mail, the New York Post. Do you want to know how damning the actual video is of him checking his watch? Well, it's so damning that when Fox News played it, they had to make it look bad by slowing it down. They put his motion in slow motion at roughly half the speed to double the time that he apparently was looking at his watch. If it was bad, they would have just used it. It wasn't bad enough, but they still used it.
What does that mean? What does it mean? He checked his watch. Now say the next sentence. Not you, but like, what's the next thought? Which means, so that says he's, just say it. Instead, like they like to leave it hanging so the people who are already upset can then go, he doesn't care. Oh my God, he's trying to get out of there. Do you know what else he was doing? Do you know what he was looking for on his watch? I have a watch. I have an Android watch. You know what it tells me? It tells me sometimes to get up and walk. Sometimes it tells me that my battery's low. Sometimes it tells me there's an alarm. Sometimes there's another alarm that says, hey, you might want to take your medicine. All that stuff happens on a watch. I don't care why he was looking at his watch. What was he saying? What was he doing? What has he done since? We find ourselves, and they know, not we find ourselves here. They purposely look to splinter off of very tangential nonsense things. Yes, you know what happened? People were mad when President Trump was in a meeting and he was looking at his phone. You know why? Because they correlated that with him tweeting nonsense about something completely unrelated while he's in a meeting about something that's important. That's why it mattered there. There was a specific thing that happened that showed he was completely disconnected from the meeting he was in. As he says, he worked so hard and he's doing everything to change the country. It showed that he's disconnected and doesn't know what's happening. If you show me that Joe Biden is disconnected and doesn't know what's happening with something, fine, I'll accept that. Joe Biden is not my uncle. I don't care. But just say he looks at his watch as a thing. What's next? Why do we care?
Somebody in the chat is saying that his son's bracelet is kept on that wrist. I don't know that for sure. You can't tell from the video, but I also know that they don't care. We could look. I don't love Joe Biden. Many people in the audience don't love Joe Biden. If we wanted to list 100 faults of his, we could. But lack of empathy for people who've lost their kids isn't one of them. It's just nonsense. So they have to attack him on that. What Trump was always good at was comforting people who lost people under his rule. Anyway, let's see, how nonsensical can the nonsense get? Well, they spread the idea that we'd left a ton of military service dogs behind. It's not true. The Department of Defense says they weren't left behind. That's not what the photos showed, but they're still running with that. By the way, Don Jr.'s pinned tweet when we went live was about the service dogs. So on the front of his Twitter was 2 lies that had already been disproved. But yeah, he really cares about what's going on in Afghanistan.
Check out the Damage Report podcast each day, wherever you get your podcasts, whether Pocket Casts or Stitcher or iTunes. You can join me as I give you the news and stories you want, with a range of co-hosts and interview guests jumping in on the fun each day. Again, that's the Damage Report, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you get them at iTunes, don't forget to rate and review. Sometimes I'll read them live on the show.